네, 안녕하세요. 이미 실적이 사전에 나와서 대체적인 결과는 알지만 에너지 매출 4밀리언이라든지 좀 그런 디테일들을 기대하고 있습니다. 네, 안녕하세요. 네, 반갑습니다. 진짜 와주셨네요. 네. 경영진이 무슨 말을 할지 참 궁금하네요. 에너지 매출 부분에 대해서 향상된 가이던스가 있으면 좋을 것 같습니다. 네, 안녕하세요. 남복 토끼님 안녕하십니까? 네, 안녕하십니까? 다들 아침부터 부지런하시네요. 네, 안녕하세요. 네. 에너지 매출 4밀리언이면 좀 이에 관한 내용이 있을 것 같은데 궁금합니다.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the CleanSpark Fiscal Year 2022 Q1 earnings call. All participants will be in a listen-only mode. Should you need assistance, please signal a conference specialist by pressing the star key followed by 0. A question and answer session will follow today's presentation. Please also note today's event is being recorded. This time, I'd like to turn the floor over to Rachel Silverstein, VP of Compliance and General Counsel.
Welcome, everyone. On behalf of CleanSpark, Inc., thank you for joining our first quarter financial results conference call for fiscal year 2022. My name is Rachel Silverstein, and I am CleanSpark's VP of Compliance and General Counsel. With us today with prepared remarks are CleanSpark's Chief Executive Officer, Zach Bradford, and Gary Vecchiarelli, our Chief Financial Officer. On today's call, we will make forward-looking statements under the safe harbor provisions of the federal securities laws. Actual results may differ materially from those contemplated in these statements. Additional information concerning factors that would cause actual results to materially differ from these forward-looking statements are contained in today's press release and in our filings with the SEC. Except as required by law, we undertake no obligation to update these statements as a result of new information or otherwise. During today's call, we will also discuss certain non-GAAP financial measures in talking about our performance. You can find the reconciliation of GAAP financial measures in our press release, which is available on our website. With that, it is my pleasure to turn the call over to our CEO, Zach Bradford.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining. It was a little over a year ago that we mined our very first Bitcoin in College Park, Georgia. Well, it's been just over a year. I believe it's fair to say that we are no longer new in this space. We've developed relationships across the industry, deepened our understanding of the mining ecosystem, and committed ourselves fully to the Bitcoin project for the value it brings to our shareholders and for the good it does in the world. This is a new era for CleanSpark and for the Bitcoin blockchain. We are evolving as a company and as an industry, becoming more transparent, more deliberate, and more intentional in what we do. Bitcoin mining has become our business, and we expect to bring fiscal discipline and operational focus to this great opportunity. We've heard your feedback about our previous communications, and with that in mind, hope to use this call to usher in a new era of transparency. To do that, I want to share with you our vision for CleanSpark. It's actually quite simple. Our vision is to be a top 5 Bitcoin miner. Please note my emphasis on Bitcoin rather than other cryptocurrencies. I echo what Fidelity's analyst recently said. Bitcoin is a superior form of money, different than other types of money that have come before, and different than any other digital currency in the market. The vision is clear to us. How we get there is also clear. Bitcoin now accounts for 90% of our revenues. Our commitment to mining Bitcoin means we are considering strategic alternatives for the energy business. All options are on the table. But know this, as a CleanSpark investor, you are investing in a sustainable Bitcoin mining company. After we share our quarterly results, we'll take some time to unveil our strategic intentions to help you understand what makes us different from other miners. With that, I'd like to transition our focus to some of our business highlights for the quarter. It was a record-breaking quarter in almost every sense of the word. We mined 660 Bitcoin, over a third of which was mined in December alone. I cannot emphasize enough how remarkable this growth has been. I'm so appreciative of the teams that racked machines through the busiest time of year to achieve these incredible results. Because of their work, we ended the quarter with a hash rate of 1.9 exahash per second. And just days after the quarter ended, we exceeded 2 exahash. We are currently operating 74 megawatts of power in support of Bitcoin mining, of which 47 megawatts are at our own properties and 27 megawatts are at co-location facilities. We also have an additional 20 megawatts under development at our newest facility. Our growth in this area has been truly remarkable. Since January of last year, we've mined over 1,826 Bitcoins, and our hash rate has steadily increased to now exceed 2.1 exahash. While we talk a lot about numbers on these calls, it's about people. That's why we're in this business, to make the world a little better, fairer, more sustainable, and more resilient. One way we are doing this is by doubling down on the commitments we've made in the communities in which we operate. We recently awarded 5 scholarships to students in Gwinnett Technical College's Computer Science program. The scholarships will cover these students' entire associate's degree. We are just getting started and expect to make similar commitments in the future. These commitments are not only important in the sense of giving back, but for demonstrating our long-term partnership with the communities in which we operate. I'll talk more about our community involvement later in the call, but first, I'd like to give the floor to Gary. Before doing that, I just want to say how thrilled we are to have Gary on our team. He brings deep experience in capital markets, and in just the last 60 days or so, has more than demonstrated his ability to effectively lead and communicate strategic priorities. Gary brings more than 2 decades of technical, operational, and strategic experience in finance and accounting to CleanSpark. He also happens to be a great guy. We're lucky to have him. Gary, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Zach. I'm very excited to be here and especially thrilled at the opportunities I see before CleanSpark. I also want to thank the outstanding team at CleanSpark for assisting me in what has been a very smooth transition. I want to reiterate what Zach said earlier. This was a tremendous and record-breaking quarter by almost every metric. From my perspective, I see a company that is well positioned for the future, with a strong balance sheet and growing revenues with high margins that drop significantly to the bottom line. Most importantly, we have a clear vision and strategic direction that will allow us to take advantage of the numerous opportunities we are evaluating. I'm very much looking forward to what this calendar and fiscal year will bring, and I'm excited to share with you CleanSpark's performance for the first quarter. As presented in our Form 10-Q, which has been filed with the SEC, our total revenues increased exponentially in the first quarter of 2022 versus the same quarter of the prior year. Total revenues for the first quarter were over $41 million compared to $2 million, representing an increase of over 17x. The overwhelming majority of this revenue was driven by our digital currency segment, with revenues totaling almost $37 million. The investments we've made to date have contributed to these record revenues. Our energy segment saw a healthy increase as well, growing to almost $4 million in the first quarter of 2022 from $300,000 in the same period of the prior year. The majority of this growth was due to the acquisition of SolarWatt in the second quarter of 2021. Revenues also saw sequential growth in Q1 versus the prior Q4, as revenues increased almost 52%, growing from $27 million to $41 million. Again, these revenue increases were driven by new installations of top-of-the-line Bitcoin miners and a hash rate, which increased throughout the quarter. Looking at gross profit, you will see the increase in revenues translated to greater profitability, particularly due to the high margins that Bitcoin mining brings. Gross profit in Q1 increased to $32 million from $930,000 in the same period a year ago. Gross margins also increased dramatically to 79% in Q1 from 41% in the same period last year. When comparing the company's performance compared to the most recent quarter, gross profit increased approximately $12.5 million to $32 million from approximately $20 million, representing a 63% increase. Our gross margins continued to increase sequentially as well, increasing from 73% in the fourth quarter to 79% in the first quarter. Moving to the next slide, you will see the operating leverage of our business model start to take form. Much of the increase in our revenues translates to increases in net income. For the first quarter 2022, net income turned positive to $14.5 million from a loss of $7 million in the same quarter last year. Net margins for Q1 represented 35% on a US GAAP basis. Sequentially, the company saw improvements in quarterly net income as well. Net income was $14.5 million, reversing a net loss in the preceding fourth quarter of $5 million. Adjusted EBITDA is a non-GAAP metric which management uses to determine the cash flow produced from operations. A reconciliation of adjusted EBITDA to net income can be found in our earnings release and Form 8-K. You will see the theme of profitability continued as adjusted EBITDA turned positive in Q1 to $24 million, reversing negative adjusted EBITDA of almost $3 million in the same quarter of the prior year. Sequentially, the company also saw adjusted EBITDA improve by $20 million from Q4 to Q1. I want to make a few final comments regarding our operating expenses. Despite seeing significant increases in net income and adjusted EBITDA, we remain mindful of our day-to-day expenses. Payroll expenses saw the largest increase in Q1 compared to the same quarter last year, accounting for a $5.6 million difference. The majority of this difference is related to stock-based compensation, a non-cash expense. I specifically want to call out this increase because of the $8.9 million of payroll expenses on our income statement. $5.7 million, or almost 2/3, is related to stock-based compensation in Q1. It is important to note that this significant expense is primarily due to the valuation methods required to value equity grants. One of the inputs used for these valuation methods is the volatility of the company's underlying stock. Since the company's stock has seen significant volatility over the past year, it inherently impacts the value of this non-cash expense. In short, the stock-based compensation is a computed value based on these valuation methods, and the company remains committed to providing compensation that is competitive and aligned with shareholder interests. Professional expenses have also increased significantly to $3.3 million in Q1 versus $1.7 million in the same quarter of the prior year. A significant portion of this increase relates to increases in audit and consulting fees, primarily due to new compliance requirements as a large accelerated filer. We do not expect these audit and consulting fees to stay elevated, and they will, in fact, decrease in subsequent quarters. Turning to our balance sheet, we had approximately $5.2 million of cash on hand at December 31st. Additionally, we own 633 Bitcoin with a book value over $30 million, bringing the company's total liquidity to over $35 million. The company converted 650 Bitcoin to USD during the quarter to pay for growth CapEx and operational expenses. And going forward, we expect to maintain minimal cash amounts on hand as we see Bitcoin as a store of value. During the first fiscal quarter 2022, the company raised almost $68 million in equity proceeds, most of which was used for growth CapEx and purchase of Bitcoin miners. On a final note, I want to turn your attention to our machine commitments. We have signed commitments for over 20,000 additional state-of-the-art Bitminer S19 machines, which will almost double our current hash rate. On these commitments, we have already funded deposits of over $117 million, which will be applied to future deliveries. And I want to point out that this $117 million is already paid for using proceeds previously raised through conversion of Bitcoin and issuance of equity. The remaining cash commitment for the deliveries is just shy of $40 million, and we expect to make these payments and take delivery monthly through October of this year. Additionally, over half of these miners to be delivered have infrastructure already committed, and we expect to secure infrastructure for the remaining miners in the coming months. I'd now like to turn it to Zach to talk into more detail about our vision and strategy.
Thanks, Gary. It's been an incredible quarter. I'm now going to spend some time talking about vision. First, I'll talk about how we plan to measure our success. Then, I'll discuss the strategic pillars we've crafted for how we'll get there. I'll talk about the first two pillars, which are our infrastructure strategy and our ESG strategy. And Gary will wrap up by talking about our capital strategy, which is our third pillar. As I mentioned at the beginning of this call, we have a vision to be a top 5 Bitcoin miner. So what do we mean by that? We intend to be a top 5 publicly traded miner in terms of our hash rate, efficiency, profitability, and commitments to sustainability. Let me spend a minute talking about each of these and where we see ourselves right now. In terms of hash rate, we've achieved 2.1 exahash with a goal of 4 exahash by the end of the year. We plan to over-deliver on our promises. We have assets and contracts already in place for approximately 4 exahash of miners, with the intention of exceeding that by many multiples as we thoughtfully secure sustainable energy. In terms of efficiency, these numbers are harder to compare, but we believe we are one of the most efficient publicly traded Bitcoin miners. Right now, our energy cost to mine 1 Bitcoin at our wholly owned locations is approximately $4,500. As Gary shared with you earlier, we are quickly growing in profitability. This quarter has been our most profitable quarter ever. We expect to continue to see profitability grow substantially this year. I'll talk more about sustainability when I introduce our ESG strategy later in the call. With our vision and these key metrics in mind, I'd now like to share with you how we intend to get there to our place as a top 5 miner. These foundational pillars will guide us over the coming months and years. I'm excited to preview them with you as we believe they set us apart from nearly every other public Bitcoin miner. When you invest in CleanSpark, you are investing in a strategy that is prepared for the rapid pace of change that the mining industry is likely to see this year. Let me spend some time talking about that last part, the rapid pace of change we expect to see. This is the foundation for our first pillar, an adaptable approach to infrastructure. Our infrastructure strategy is about how we will build and when we build, with the ultimate goal of continuing to own the majority of megawatts we have under management. This is about owning our destiny, rather than letting external factors dictate how or when we grow. Now, we deploy a hybrid infrastructure that includes a combination of fully owned data centers and co-location arrangements with partners that share our values. Right now, the balance of our infrastructure is weighted towards owned mining facilities, and we intend to use co-location as needed to make sure that any machines received are hashing as soon as possible. We are thoughtfully evaluating additional sites to expand our operations, and we believe co-location agreements are a useful strategy for securing our future in the present. Our infrastructure pillar also governs our approach to how and when we acquire machines. We believe in balance. Many of our peers have taken the approach of making huge machine orders with delivery dates many months or even years into the future, all while tying up substantial amounts of capital and taking on significant contractual risk. Many of these machines will be outdated before they even ever start hashing. This is the Achilles heel in the strategy of many of our peers that have chosen expeditious growth without regard to the consequence. The ASIC ecosystem is ripe for disruption. We want to be in the position to take advantage of advancements in machine technology that are on the horizon. While a handful of companies hold most of the product space, and while competing with them will be extremely difficult, all you have to do is consider the last 40 years of technological progress to understand that improvements are coming. As part of this strategy, we are investing heavily in immersion cooling. We expect to have our first batch of immersion-cooled machines hashing at our Norcross facility by the end of the current quarter. And as many of you on this call know, immersion cooling helps us to be more efficient. It also reduces otherwise unnecessary energy loads, and we believe allows our machines to run longer and faster, by 30% or more by some estimates. Our second pillar governs our ESG initiative. We are committed to ESG principles because it's the right thing to do. It is not a marketing campaign, but fundamental to the way we do business. As such, we've engaged NASDAQ's ESG advisory services to analyze our performance and help us engineer a roadmap for achieving our success. We are under no illusions that the journey will be quick and easy. We've identified some low-hanging fruit that we will immediately be able to work on so as to see some fast improvements in our results. But this roadmap is more like a cross-country trip than it is a quick drive to the convenience store. It will take sustained and intentional effort. The results of those efforts, we believe, are that we will set the gold standard, or better said, a Bitcoin standard, for publicly traded miners. We've long taken a keen interest in our environmental impact. We believe regulators will continue to scrutinize and tighten their oversight this year in respect to how Bitcoin miners use energy. We're mitigating that impact by prioritizing renewable and clean energy, including wind, solar, and nuclear energy. There are some carbon-producing energy in the regional energy mixes we buy from, which is why we also participate in carbon offsetting programs like Georgia's Simple Solar. We are committed to supporting renewable energy infrastructure, and like other forward-looking miners, believe that Bitcoin mining plays an important role in the work of decarbonizing the economy. Miners are uniquely positioned to support large-scale renewable energy, and even perhaps nuclear projects. While we have spent a lot of time in our history as a miner talking about our environmental efforts, there's also the S and the G to keep in mind. Social. We are making our workforce more diverse and inclusive by focusing on hiring women and people of color. We don't want diversity to just be a talking point. We think it is something to be celebrated, and we firmly believe that a diverse workforce, in terms of both how we look and how we think, is crucial to achieving our vision of being a top 5 Bitcoin miner. We are also undertaking initiatives to ensure that our employees, no matter where they're at in the hierarchy, are paid above market rates, have access to affordable health care, and have a healthy work-life balance. We believe this approach will foster long-termism for our employees. Our social commitments extend beyond our workforce and include the communities where we live and work. I mentioned earlier the scholarship in Gwinnett County. We intend to bolster our philanthropic efforts by contributing resources to improve the lives of others. Bitcoin mining is an incredibly profitable endeavor. The communities we work in should share in the benefit. Lastly, I want to briefly talk about governance. Over the last quarter, we took efforts to bolster our transparency by issuing monthly Bitcoin production updates. Articulating our vision and strategy in this call is another way we hope to demonstrate transparency in the way we make decisions. We are working to achieve value for our shareholders and the millions of people worldwide that rely on the Bitcoin blockchain. Our attention to governance, including board oversight, underscores the commitment to be an ethical company. We have an obligation to do what is right, just, and fair, and to avoid harm. Governance to us means not only playing by the rules of the game, but leading the adoption of these rules. I'd now like to turn the time over to Gary to discuss our third and final pillar, our capital strategy.
Thank you, Zach. Our capital strategy is premised on the wise and sustainable use of our resources. The motivating principle behind our capital strategy is straightforward and clear. We intend to operate our business in a smart, disciplined, and profitable fashion. Our capital strategy has three components, and I like to think of them as potential levers that we can pull to achieve our vision. These three levers or tools are the use of debt, Bitcoin, and equity. While it is no surprise those three components are the types of capital available to our company, I want to share with you how management views its capital allocation and how we expect to use them going forward. From our perspective, capital allocation is a very important priority, especially since we are involved in a business which requires significant investment in CapEx. When coupled with strict fiscal discipline and a keen eye on our CapEx costs and cash operating expenses, the proper allocation will help propel our growth even further. Let me share with you in detail how we expect these individual levers will be used in our capital strategy going forward. Foremost, acquiring debt capital and leveraging our balance sheet is an obvious opportunity. As you are aware, we currently have no long-term debt, and we see substantial opportunity to utilize our strong balance sheet to invest in growth. The cost of capital related to debt instruments is the easiest of the three types of capital to forecast and budget for, and frankly, the lowest cost of capital currently. We are actively seeking to inject debt into our capital structure at reasonable rates, and we only expect to see the cost of debt capital become more favorable as time goes on, especially as traditional debt markets continue to warm up to the crypto industry. On a side note, we have recently established new commercial banking relationships, which we are optimistic will lead to lending at more traditional rates. As I mentioned, our balance sheet is strong and presents an immediate opportunity for leverage. The overwhelming majority of our mining portfolio consists of top-of-the-line miners, nearly all of them the latest generation S19 models. We believe this makes us attractive to asset-backed lenders, and we are exploring the use of ABL or similar facilities to provide the growth capital needed to expand our operations. The second lever available to us is our Bitcoin holdings. We are in the business because we believe in the future of Bitcoin, both as a store of value and a medium of exchange. As a miner, Bitcoin is our functional currency and how we get paid. Therefore, we think it makes sense to use Bitcoin to generate even more Bitcoin. Now, monetizing Bitcoin does not only mean selling Bitcoin into the market. We expect to deploy advanced strategies to recognize further yield from our Bitcoin holdings, and we have recently established new relationships to help develop these yield-producing strategies. Meanwhile, we'll continue to be opportunistic about selling Bitcoin at the right prices. While we will convert some mined Bitcoin to USD, we expect our Bitcoin holdings will increase incrementally over the long term, because as I mentioned earlier, we believe in the long-term value of Bitcoin. And there's one other point I can't stress enough. Our approach to hodling is very strategic. We have occasionally received feedback for not hodling everything we mine. However, I want to be very clear. A 100% hodl strategy comes with a significant downside for shareholders. We believe that opportunistically selling and strategically growing our Bitcoin balance will be the best way to protect shareholder value in the long run. In fact, as one of the first publicly traded miners to actively and openly use Bitcoin to fund our operations and growth, we believe other miners will and are following our lead. Finally, let me spend some time talking about the use of equity. I want to begin by saying that we have not issued equity utilizing our ATM since November 19th. We also have no plans to draw down on the facility in the near future. Like you have heard throughout our presentation, we will continue to be disciplined and strategic about every decision we make, including the issuance of equity. As a publicly traded company, issuing equity will always be an option, but I want to emphatically state that we do not have an interest in issuing equity when management feels its stock is trading at a significant valuation discount to its peers. We also recognize there are other means of capital allocation which have a much lower cost of capital. Looking into the future, it is our expectation that there will be consolidation in the industry, and we want to be in the position to take advantage of accretive acquisitions using our equity as currency, but naturally only at a respectable and fair valuation. Therefore, we do see issuing equity as consideration in any M&A transactions we may enter into in the future. One final note I want to make regarding equity. We recognize that equity represents an anti-dilutive opportunity as well. We expect that as our strategy is executed and we continue the path of significant profitability, the company will consider returning capital to shareholders, most likely in the form of stock buybacks. Bringing our description of this third pillar to a close, it is important to note that our cost of capital changes daily between these three components, each of which have trade-offs. We will continue to be mindful of dilution, especially when a valuation gap exists, and we will remain nimble in order to be opportunistic in lowering our total cost of capital. How and when we prioritize our capital allocation will always be driven by the concept of maximizing shareholder value and the lowest cost of capital available to the company. We know the execution of our capital strategy will be measured by the returns recognized by shareholders and stakeholders, while also making them a proud member of the CleanSpark family. I'd now like to turn the call over to Zach before we open the line for questions.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you for all of you for Gary, for spending time outlining our capital strategy, which is the centerpiece of our financial pillar. Combined with our infrastructure and ESG pillars, we believe that our vision to be a top 5 Bitcoin miner will be accomplished and is sustainable. You can expect us to live by these pillars. They will guide all of our efforts during the remainder of the fiscal and calendar year and beyond. We intend to use them as a clarifying framework to help us make decisions that are in the best interest of our employees, shareholders, community stakeholders, and the Bitcoin community at large. We are optimistic about the future and the opportunities we see on the horizon. Our industry is evolving, and we believe that CleanSpark is leading this process. Operator, this concludes our prepared remarks. We'd now like to open the line for questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, we'll begin the question and answer session. To ask a question, you may press star and then 1. To withdraw your questions, you may press star and 2. If you are using a speakerphone, we do ask that you please pick up your handset prior to pressing the numbers to ensure the best sound quality. Once again, that is star and then 1. Our first question today comes from Kevin Dede from H.C. Wainwright. Please go ahead with your question.
Hi, this is Nick Narang for Kevin Dede of H.C. Wainwright. Thanks so much for inviting us to join the call, and thanks for taking our questions. We have a series of questions that I'm hoping we can address one by one, if that's okay.
Yes, Nick, let's go for it.
Awesome, thank you. Given CleanSpark's hash rate rollout plans viewed against its current access to power, how does CleanSpark plan to address near-term power needs?
That's a great question. You know, like I mentioned in the presentation, you know, we're going to do it through a hybrid approach. Again, what that really means is co-location we view as speed to market. So as we build and develop our own infrastructure, we intend to supplement that with co-location, but we're always going to maintain a majority interest of our megawatts under our own management. We believe that that is the most sustainable way to grow a business, that allows us to control our destiny instead of putting it solely in the hands of colocation. But again, it's about speed to getting hash rate up. Right now, every hash that's hashed is worth more today than it's going to be worth in a year. So we want to capture that opportunity now instead of later.
Got it. Thank you. What are the criteria in which are most important in evaluating new energy sources for expanding power access in current facilities or sources for potential new mining sites?
For us, first and foremost, price is going to matter a lot. But really, we won't look at something unless the sustainable mix of power is there. So we focus on ensuring that it has a high mix of renewables. And so both of those together, we don't see one going without the other. We think that they have to be looked at together. And I think that that's one of the problems we're seeing in the industry is it's often viewed as an either or. And we think it can be both. Both the view of sustainability being important, but also the view of the price. And that's also sometimes why it takes time to structure the right agreements for a company rather than grabbing the nearest power to us.
Could you discuss CleanSpark's view to mining hardware? We understand the company primarily relies on Bitmain currently, but what other mining rig manufacturers are under review? And how does the CleanSpark management team view the Intel Bonanza mine chip introduction slated later this month?
We're actually really excited about hearing more and doing some diligence on what Intel has to offer and bring to the table. Right now, we use the best miners that are available. That's the Bitmain S19 series, and we will continue to do so until somebody can bring something to market that is truly better. We think it's really important that miners do their due diligence in understanding what technology actually delivers. There's a lot of claims out there. There's a lot of statements that are being made, and we believe prior to adopting anything new, we would have to do extensive diligence to make sure we're making the right decision for our shareholders, and also, most importantly, that the vendors that we select can deliver on the results that they're promising.
Given that everyone on this call is a Bitcoin bull, how does management see Bitcoin trading this year and potentially how high against continued steep network hash rate escalation?
I think that that's something where we can all speculate. We believe it's going to continue to go on a very strong run into the future, but we also believe that there's going to be ebbs and flows. And that's where our opportunistic strategy really comes into play, is we expect to take advantage of those ebbs and flows as they occur. And so, any of us could guess. We think it's got a really long run ahead of it. We think we're going to see adoption increase at all levels, both at, from a government regulatory level where it's easier to interact with, to different countries adopting it as their own, form of currency. We think that Bitcoin has a very strong future ahead of it, and with that will come increased value. Now, as it relates to difficulty, difficulty will certainly increase in the future. We think that there's going to be a balancing point. There's a lot of new machines that are coming online in the future that are going to lead to that increase. We're bringing new machines online. Our peers are bringing new machines online. But I do think that sometime midway through this year, we're going to see a tipping point where the efficiency of these new miners are going to affect some of the older miners, older generation, whether it's an S9 or something similar. And I think that we're going to actually see an unplugging event happen this year. That still means a year as a whole, I think we're going to see difficulty continue to increase. But I do think at some point, at least for a period of time, we're going to see a balancing effect where some machines that are less efficient come offline in exchange for the new machines coming online. So I'm not going to speculate what that percentage looks like, but I do think that it will be a meaningful percentage that difficulty increases this year. For us, it's about keeping a pace of growth that exceeds that difficulty. We believe we can do so, and so that's going to continue to be our intention.
And then one final question for you. Thanks so much for answering the previous four. How may CleanSpark use its energy relationships to bolster its position as a Bitcoin miner? And how should investors think about that asset and management's ability to utilize it?
I think it's less, I want to rephrase your question a little bit. It's less about the relationships and more about the experience. What we are bringing to our Bitcoin business, and as I said before, that's what we are, is the energy expertise and experience that we've garnered so that everything we do going forward is with energy in mind. We really understand it, and the value that brings to the business is what lives inside each of our employees that they've gained over the past years. So for us, I mentioned one of the measurements we're going to use is efficiency. So we're going to continue to drive efficiency of our mining operations, and we're going to continue to focus on renewables. We understand both of those very well, and that experience will definitely pay dividends in the future periods to come.
Got it. Thanks again for taking our questions.
Hey, appreciate the questions, Nick, and appreciate H.C. Wainwright taking an interest.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Our next question comes from Tyler DiMatteo from BTIG. Please go ahead with your question.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. How you doing today? Good?
Hey, doing great, Tyler. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. So could I just touch a little bit upon, the hash capacity ramp of your facilities? I know you briefly alluded to it, but how should we kind of think about the timeline here? Could we see, another facility kind of built out by the end of the year here? I know you touched upon the co-location versus infrastructure. Could you just kind of add some more color to that for me in terms of the timeline and that build?
Yeah, absolutely. So, right now we have 74 megawatts under management. We're in the process of building another 20. That's well on its way. We should see that this quarter, which should bring a fairly significant jump in our hash rate. Now, what that leaves us pursuing between now and 4 exahash is essentially 40 megawatts. Now, as part of that, we are in discussions of both angles of that, both from a co-location side and a facility side. We believe we have opportunities to actually exceed our demands underway. We look forward to talking about those further in the coming weeks, but we do intend to both acquire a new facility and put that into use inside of 2022 and also enter into other co-location arrangements. So I think you're going to see both mid-year happening on our side with some very substantial increases before year-end is our goal.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So I guess if I could just follow up, I guess when we look at the market today and we talk a little about rig pricing, it's really hard to ignore, an S19 Pro is going for $2,000 to $3,000 at the beginning of 2021. How do you think about rig pricing here over the next couple quarters, and I guess even into 2023, given that, there is this sort of an arms race for rigs right now? I'm just curious about how CleanSpark kind of just thinks through this in the near and medium term.
Yeah, our view is the arms race concept is the wrong way to look at it. We believe in maximizing the use of our capital. We've always been able to find rigs when we need them. Now, we have entered into futures contracts where you make down payments and you pay along the way for future delivery. We've also engaged in spot pricing. Now, our belief and what we're actually seeing develop in the market is mining rig prices are coming down right now from where they were last quarter, and fairly significantly. We've seen as much as a 33% decrease in spot prices. This isn't driven just solely by the price of Bitcoin, but it's simply economics, supply and demand. There were a lot of, whether it was suppliers or other miners, that entered into future contracts with an inability to plug their machines in. That has led to a glut of miners coming onto the market. We actually expect this to continue in the coming months, where it should further push down spot prices on the miners, and we believe in taking advantage of those opportunities. We did so last quarter, where opportunistically we made a spot price purchase for immediate delivery, and we immediately were able to plug those machines in. And it just comes down to capital. I also think we're going to see spot prices of miners decrease as other opportunities or other manufacturers come online. You know, Intel has made their announcement. There's several other announcements coming around. Some of these are going to be more credible than others, and some manufacturers are actually going to be able to deliver results and others won't. Again, we want to be positioned to take advantage of new technology, higher efficiency, better performance, rather than entering into a contract and calling it an arms race and putting down hundreds of millions of dollars now for miners that could well be obsolete before they ever show up. So it's about a balanced approach and timing, but it all ties back to our capital strategy.
Okay, great. Thank you. Really appreciate that. I'll turn it back to the queue.
Hey, thank you very much, Tyler. Appreciate you and BTIG's interest in CleanSpark. This actually concludes the time we have allocated to questions. We really do appreciate everybody's participation, especially the analysts.
Before we end today's earnings call, I would like to remind everyone that this call will be available for replay later today. Please refer to today's press release for dial-in and replay instructions available via the company's website. Thank you for joining.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we'll conclude today's conference. We do thank you for attending. You may now disconnect your lines.
네, 끝났습니다. 채팅 보면서 이거 들으면서 막 하는데 정신이 없네요. 일단은 다시 한 번 더 복기를 해보겠습니다. 먼저 목표는 탑5 채굴 기업이 되겠다는 일단 목표를 가지고 회사가 나아간다고 하고요. 현재 기준으로 지금 2.1 XRC 그리고 74메가와트 용량의 전력을 지금 가동하고 있다고 합니다. 그리고 이 74메가와트 중에서 27메가와트는 코인민트를 통해서 이제 클린스파크 채굴기만 그 코인민트에 설치를 하고 운영에 관한 거는 운영은 코인민트에서 호스팅해주는 그런 방식으로 운영을 하고 있고 나머지는 직접 운영하고 있다고 합니다. 그리고 연말 목표를 지금 4XRC라고 하는데 지금 그 경영진이 말하기는 항상 우리는 그 제시했던 프로젝션 그런 예상치를 지금 초과해서 달성하고 있기 때문에 자신 있다라고 하고 있고 그 채굴 원가는 4,501비트 코인을 채굴하는데 4,500달러 정도가 든다고 해요. 지금 상식으로 제가 알고 있기로 지금 채굴 원가가 마라톤 디지털 같은 경우가 1비트 코인에 6,000 달러 정도 되는데 경영진이 말하기도 아마 지금 상장된 채굴 기업 중에서 가장 효율적인 채굴자가 우리다라고 하고 있고요. 지금 전략으로는 일단은 채굴장을 조성하는 거를 1순위로 그러니까 이제 수직적으로 통합된 그런 직접 보유한 채굴장을 만드는 것이 1순위인데 만약에 채굴기가 들어온 게 있으면은 이 채굴기를 놀리지 않고 바로 호스팅하겠다. 지금 스피드가 생명이다. 뭐 이렇게 말을 하고 있습니다. 그리고 전략적으로 미리 채굴기 주문을 쌓아놓기보다 최신 채굴기 그리고 더 싸고 효율적인 채굴기 위주로 주문하겠다 라고 밝히고 있기 때문에 이거는 이제 제 생각이지만 앞으로 채굴기 가격이 더 낮아지고 새로운 괜찮은 채굴기들이 나오고 한다면은 채굴기 주문을 좀 크게 할 수 있지 않나 그런 뉴스를 기대해 볼 수 있지 않나 싶습니다. 왜냐면은 지금 다른 채굴 기업들이 연말 목표를 뭐 거의 뭐 6XRC, 8XRC, 뭐 10XRC 넘게 지금 제시를 하고 있는데 클린스파크는 채굴기 계약 용량 자체가 지금 많지 않다 보니까 연말 목표가 다른 기업에 비해 낮거든요. 근데 클린스파크가 지금 해시레이트를 확충해온 속도나 그런 이력들을 보면은 4XRC로 멈출 것 같지 않고 아마 앞으로 지금 최신 채굴기 위주로 주문을 하겠다라는 거를 좀 생각해 볼 수 있을 것 같습니다. 제 생각에도 아무튼 지금 그 채굴기 가격이 계속 떨어지고 있다고 하니까 큰 딜이 하나 있을 것 같아요. 그리고 제가 그 매튜 CEO한테 DM을 보냈었는데 트위터로 인텔 그 채굴기를 좀 고려를 하고 있다고 하더라고요. 그래서 그럼 인텔 채굴기를 아무튼 좀 알아보고 있는 것 같습니다. 그리고 계속적으로 순행 쿨링 방식의 그런 투자를 하겠다. 순행 쿨링 방식을 이용하면은 기존에 있는 채굴기들을 이제 효율성을 업그레이드를 할 수 있죠. 그래서 이 부분에도 계속해서 투자를 하겠다고 하고, 이제 여기서부터는 새로운 CFO가 나와서 그 전략에 대해서 설명해 주었는데, 우선은 대차대조표를 활용해서 아무튼 부채, 대출 같은 그런 그 주주 가치를 희석시키지 않는 자산들을 활용해서 계속해서 발전을 해나가겠다고 하였고요. 제 생각에 이것도 이제 제 생각인데 시니어 노트나 뭐 다른 장기 부채를 차입을 해서 지금 그 CFO가 말하기는 전통의 그런 은행들도 비트코인 채굴자 친화적으로 좀 변화하고 있는 환경이라고 해요. 금융 환경이. 그래서 아주 낮은 이율의 장기 부채를 조달할 수 있는 그런 뉴스가 있기를 좀 기대해 볼 만한 것 같습니다. 그리고 비트코인은 계속해서 좋은 가격이 올 때마다 팔겠다라고 했고요. 그리고 호들이라고 하는데 뭐 호들링, 무지성으로 그냥 존버만 하는 전략은 우리는 좋지 않다고 보고 비트코인은 계속 좋은 가격에 팔겠다고 했습니다. 그리고 21년 11월 19일 이후에 그 ATM 오퍼링은 한 적이 없고 앞으로도 할 예정이 없다고 하고요. 아무튼 간에 추가 주식 발행을 최대한 제한하겠다고 했습니다. 그리고 뭐 주식 발행을 통한 인수라든지 뭐 자사주 매입, 그리고 지금 주가가 매우 낮기 때문에 주주 가치를 제고할 수 있는 다양한 전략을 검토하고 있다고 하고요. 뭐 사실 이런 거는 좀 기대 안 하긴 하는데 있다고 하면은 보너스라고 생각하고 이것도 한번 기다려 보겠습니다. 그 인수 부분은 지금 그 외국 유튜버 중에 렉스 파이낸스라는 친구가 클린스파크가 그 전력을 많이 확보하고 있지만 가격이 싼 기업들을 인수를 해서 그 확보한 전력을 이용하지 않겠냐 뭐 이런 그 말을 트위터에서 했었는데 그 매튜 CEO 그 사장분도 거기에 좋아요를 찍어주고 클린스파크 공식 트위터도 좋아요를 찍어서 뭐 이거를 추진하고 있는 거는 확실한 것 같아요. 이것도 한번 아무튼 기대를 해보겠습니다. 그리고 뭐 다양한 얘기를 했는데 제가 그 너무 말도 많고 해서 그리고 중요하지 않은 내용도 많아서 다 적지 못했으니까 그 나중에 시킹알파에 이거 대본 뜰 거예요. 속기록 뜨면은 그거 한 번 더 확인해 보시길 바라겠습니다. 그리고 Q&A 이제 했는데요. 앞으로 전력 확보 계획은 이제 하이브리드로 직접 채굴장도 만들고 안 되면 호스팅도 하고 어쨌든 경영진이 가장 중요하게 생각하는 것은 해시레이트 확장 속도가 중요하다고 생각한다고 합니다. 하루라도 더 많이 채굴기를 가동을 해서 더 많이 캐는 게 중요하다고 그랬고요. 그리고 전력 선택의 기준은 재생에너지 비율이 높은 에너지를 선택하지만 전력 가격도 중요하다고 했고요. 그러니까 이런 부분은 좀 괜찮네요. 클린스파크가 뭔가 그냥 1차원적으로 생각했을 때는 비싸더라도 재생에너지를 쓸 거다 뭐 이런 생각이 있는데 전력 가격도 중요하게 생각한다고 하고요. 클린스파크가 다른 채굴 기업과 다르게 지금 비트메인에서 만든 채굴기만 주문하고 있거든요. 그래서 뭐 어떤 다른 채굴기 제조회사를 고려 중이냐고 했는데 아까 제가 말씀드렸듯이 지금 인텔에서 새로운 채굴기가 나오는데 이걸 조사하고 있고 경영진이 생각하기에 지금은 비트메인의 S19 모델이 최고라고 생각을 하고 있는데 만약에 더 좋은 게 있고 더 효율적인 게 있으면은 그걸로 주문을 하겠다라고 했습니다. 그리고 해시레이트가 급격하게 증가하는 중인데 비트코인 가격 전망에 대해서 어떻게 생각하냐고 했는데요. 당연히 채굴 기업의 CEO니까 하는 말이겠지만 비트코인 가격은 더 갈 거라고 보고 있다고 하고, 해시레이트가 증가한다는 것은 비트코인을 채굴하는 원가가 늘어난다는 것이기 때문에 이렇게 채산성이 하락한다면은 정확히 S9 비트메인 S9 같이 그런 효율성이 좋지 않은 구형 마이너들은 결국에는 채산성이 떨어져서 퇴출되거나 이제 그거를 돌릴 수가 없게 될 거기 때문에 채굴 난이도는 결국 균형을 찾을 거라고 하는데, 이거는 너무 장기적인 전망이라서 지켜봐야 될 것 같고요. 그리고 에너지 관련 자산들과 경험을 채굴에 최대한 활용하고 있다고 하고, 이런 질문은 사실 이제 매 실적 발표마다 앵무새처럼 나오는 질문들이라 별로 중요하진 않은 것 같고요. 그리고 해시레이트 전망치 같은 경우도 좀 얘기를 해줬는데, 이제 현재 총 74메가와트를 하고 있고, 메가와트의 전력을 공급받으면서, 이건 호스팅 포함이고요. 채굴기를 돌리고 있는데 지금 20메가와트를 건설 중이라고 하고 2022년 내에 20메가와트를 구동할 수 있는 그 시설이 건설 완료된다고 합니다. 그러면은 4XRC라는 목표를 달성하기 위해 40메가와트가 추가로 필요한데, 여기서 나머지는 채굴장을 건설하지 못한 나머지는 호스팅을 활용한다고 했습니다. 이 부분은 제가 잘 못 들었는데 아마 이 내용이 맞을 것 같아요. 나중에 한번 속기로 확인해 보고 달라진 게 있으면 제가 커뮤니티 글로 업데이트 해드리겠습니다. 그리고 채굴기 가격 전망에 대해서도 또 질문이 나왔었는데요. 현물 시장을 가격을 계속 지켜보고 있다고 해요. 지금 채굴기 가격이 이제 선물 시장과 현물 시장 가격이 괴리되고 있습니다. 선물 시장 같은 경우는 앞으로 그 채굴기를 이 가격에 배송받겠다라고 하는 그런 계약이고, 현물 시장 가격은 당장 살 수 있는 그 가격인데, 현물 시장 가격이 계속 떨어지고 있다고 해요. 선물 시장 가격은 이미 사람들이 비싸게 계약을 해놨기 때문에 높은 상태이고요. 그래서 앞으로 선물 시장 가격, 채굴기 선물 가격도 계속 떨어질 것 같다라고 전망을 하고 있고, 새로운 채굴기 생산자들이 계속 늘어나고 있거든요. 최근에 지금 그 남폭토끼님이 말하신 누마이너나 인텔이라든지 지금 전 스퀘어 현 블록에서도 채굴기를 개발하고 있고, 이번에 그 스트롱홀드 마이닝 회사의 그 발표 자료를 보니까 거기는 또 다른 채굴기를 쓰더라고요. 그래서 지금 제3의 채굴기 생산자들 많이 나오고 있기 때문에 어쨌든 클린스파크의 전략은 계약을 많이 안 해놓고 지금 4XRC 분량만 해놨죠. 그리고 돈을 쌓아놨기 때문에 더 싸고 효율적인 채굴기를 구매할 것이라고 하고요. 지금 클린스파크 같은 경우는 4XRC 분량의 채굴기는 이미 다 계약이 완료된 상태라고 하고, 지불도 끝났다고 해요. 그렇기 때문에 이제는 쌓아놓은 그 에셋을 가지고 더 좋은 채굴기를 구매하는 계약을 좀 기대해 볼 수 있을 것 같습니다. 오늘 어닝 이 정도까지 해보겠고요. 지금 잘 들리고 있나요? 채팅이 없네요. 다 지금 출근길에 들으시고 계신 것 같은데, 지금 시장 반응은 어떤가요? 애프터에서 6.8% 지금 상승하면서 하고 있네요. 네네. 시장 반응도 나쁘지 않은 것 같아요. 근데 한 가지 아쉬운 게 그 에너지 부분에서 매출이 4밀리언이 나왔는데 이게 어떻게 나온 건지 좀 자세히 좀 듣고 싶었는데, 이런 부분에 지금 말이 없어가지고 이거는 한번 땡큐 서류를 봐야 될 것 같아요. 거기에 정확히 에너지 매출 브레이크다운이 되어 있는지 모르겠는데 이 부분도 한번 확인해 보고, 아무튼 제가 그 SEC 서류 정확히 좀 다시 읽어보고 이거 속기록도 읽어보고 해서 이제 완벽히 정리를 해가지고 커뮤니티에 글로 다시 올려드리겠습니다. 제가 봤을 때는 괜찮은 것 같아요. 어쨌든 조금 좀 걱정이 있었는데 지금 2.1 XRC까지 잘 확충을 했고, 채굴 원가가 1비트당 4,500달러라는 그런 부분에 대해서 다시 한 번 더 그 확인을 해주었고, 그리고 이제 그 EPS가, 그러니까 순이익이 흑자 전환을 했잖아요. 이제 EPS 흑자 전환을 했기 때문에, 그리고 1월 저희 모두 알다시피 1월 채굴량 아주 좋았고 2월, 3월 채굴량도 좋을 예정인 거 알고 있으니까 또 다음 실적 발표가 기대가 되고 그렇습니다. 일단은 EPS가 0.35면은 지금까지 발표한 채굴 기업 기준으로는 거의 뭐 제일 높거든요. 지금 비트팜과 저번 실적 발표했던 비트팜과 유사한 수준인데, 실적은 항상 클린스파크가 실망만 시켜왔는데 이번에는 괜찮게 나온 것 같아요. 그리고 비용 부분에 대해서 CFO가 좀 얘기를 했었는데, 그런 부분에 대해서도 어쨌든 발행 주식 수를 늘리지 않고 그리고 원가를 잘 관리하면서 지금 주주 가치를 높이겠다고 하니까, 그 말은 그 한 주당 이제 EPS를 잘 높이겠다는 뜻이니까 다음 실적도 좀 기대를 해보면 될 것 같습니다. 한 가지 의문인 게, 그 그리니지 제너레이션, 그 GREE라는 회사가 얼마 전에 그 실적 발표는 아니고 예비 실적 발표를 했어요. 이제 공식 실적 발표는 아니고 데이터만 제공을 한 건데, 거기가 그 한 600개 정도 비트코인을 채굴했었거든요, 지난 분기에. 근데 클린스파크는 660개를 채굴했는데 지금 채굴 매출이 그리니지보다 좀 낮게 잡혔거든요. 그래서 채굴 지금 그런 거를 살펴봤을 때 아직 거기가 아마 틀렸겠죠. 그 지금 1 비트코인당 단가를 얼마로 잡냐에서 차이가 난 것 같은데, 어쨌든 그런 부분에서 괜찮은 것 같습니다. 그래서 저는 사전 발표가 나왔을 때 좀 놀랐어요. 이렇게 비트코인 채굴 매출이 낮지 했는데, 그거는 그냥 회계상의 차이인 것 같습니다. 앞으로 다른 기업들도 아무튼 같은 회계 기준을 사용할 테니까 이제 비교를 해보면 될 것 같아요. 클린스파크가 채굴 기업 중에 거의 가장 먼저 발표를 했으니까. 어쨌든 그리고 ATM 관련해서도 뭐 인수나 뭐 그런 특수한 상황이 아니고서는 최대한 아무튼 안 한다고 하니까, 실제로 11월 19일 이후로 새로운 주식을 발행한 적이 없고, 이거는 조금 걱정을 내려놓으셔도 될 것 같아요. 이 부분에 대해서 걱정을 많이 하셨잖아요. 그래서 이제 마지막으로 이번 실적 발표에서 나온 떡밥을 기대해 볼 만한 부분을 정리해 본다면은, 1번 새로운 채굴기 계약, 큰 계약. 그래서 인텔이나 비트메인 새로운 모델들을 계약하지 않을까 기대가 되고, 2번으로 장기 부채를 장기 부채를 이용해서 계약 대금을 지불하지 않을까. ATM은 활용하지 않고요. 뭐 이런 부분은 제 생각에 뭐 한 5% 이자율 뭐 3-4% 미만의 뭐 시니어 노트나 뭐 그런 것들을 활용하지 않을까 싶고요. 그래서 3번으로 새로운 채굴장 건설 중인 새로운 채굴장에 관한 소식. 그 노크로스 지역과에서 지금 짓고 있는 것 같은데 20메가와트 분량이고, 그리고 또 이 정도가 된 것 같아요. 그리고 더 뭐 에너지 부분이라든지 더 다른 정보 있으면 유튜브 커뮤니티에 오늘 정리해서 올려드리겠습니다. 아침부터 실적 발표 지켜보시느라 수고 많으셨고요. 출근하시는 분들은 출근 잘하시고, 그리고 클린스파크도 일단 오늘은 상승해줬으니까 좀 마음고생이 다들 많으셨을 텐데 좀 내려놓으시고 편하게 오늘 하루를 보내셨으면 좋겠습니다. 이제 곧 라이브 끄겠습니다. 다들 수고하셨습니다. 네. 모두 좋은 하루 되세요. 네. 네. 감사합니다.